I always thought my life was perfect. My husband, Michael, was a kind and steady man. We had a beautiful home, careers that kept us comfortable, and a quiet, predictable routine. But that routine was what suffocated me. Each day bled into the next with no excitement, no passion, no surprises. I started to feel like I was disappearing, becoming just another piece of furniture in our orderly life. One evening, while scrolling through social media, I saw him. His name was Adam. His photos were magnetic, towering cliffs, deep blue oceans, and him standing at the edge of it all, smiling like the world was his playground. He exuded danger, confidence, and freedom, everything I felt my life was missing. Without thinking, I followed him. The first message came a week later. "Hey, noticed you followed me. You into hiking?" My heart raced as I stared at the message. I could have ignored it, but something in me, that restless, suffocated part, wanted to answer. "I used to be, but it's been years," I replied. "Too bad, the world's too beautiful to stay still for long," he wrote back. His words felt like a challenge. From that moment, our conversations flowed easily. We talked about everything: adventures, favorite books, places we wanted to visit. At first, it felt harmless, like a breath of fresh air. But then Adam started asking more personal questions. "Why did you stop hiking?" he asked one night. I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Life happened. Marriage, work, responsibilities." "Sounds like excuses. You still have a pulse, don't you?" I laughed, but his words stayed with me. He made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. Then came the first fight with Michael. "Who are you texting all the time?" he asked one night as we were getting ready for bed. "Just a friend," I said quickly, too quickly. Michael frowned. "A friend? Since when? You've been glued to your phone for weeks." "It's nothing. Just someone I met online. We talk about hiking and books. That's all." Michael didn't look convinced. "You don't talk to me like that anymore. Maybe we should start there." I felt a pang of guilt, but brushed it off. "You're overthinking this." "Am I?" His voice was sharp, but he didn't press further. The next day, Adam sent me another message. "Ever ride a motorcycle?" "No," I replied. "That's a shame. Let's fix that. Meet me downtown Friday night." My heart pounded. I knew what this meant. This wasn't just texting anymore. It was a line, a bold, dangerous line, and I was about to cross it. When Friday came, I told Michael I was meeting a friend from work. The lie came out too easily. He kissed my cheek and said, "Don't be late." Adam was waiting for me outside a trendy bar downtown. He leaned against his motorcycle, helmet in hand, looking like he belonged to another world. "Thought you might chicken out," he said with a grin. "I don't chicken out," I shot back, trying to sound braver than I felt. He handed me the helmet. "Prove it." The ride was exhilarating. The wind whipped past me as the city blurred into streaks of light. I clung to Adam, feeling a thrill I hadn't known in years. When we stopped at a quiet overlook, my heart was still racing. "How's it feel?" he asked, his voice low and teasing. "Amazing," I admitted, breathless. He looked at me, his gaze intense. "This is just the beginning, you know. There's a whole world out there waiting for you. You just have to want it." I knew I should leave. I should thank him for the ride and go back to my life. But something about the way he looked at me, like he saw the version of myself I'd forgotten, held me there. "You're playing a dangerous game," I said quietly. He smirked. "Danger's half the fun." In that moment, I didn't care about the rules, the consequences, or even Michael. All I cared about was the fire Adam had reignited in me. I didn't know it yet, but I was already falling into the abyss. The nights I spent with Adam felt like an escape from reality, but the cracks in my real life were beginning to show. Michael started noticing the small changes, the late nights, my distracted looks, my phone constantly by my side. I tried to play it cool, but guilt was a weight I couldn't quite shake off. "Where were you last night?" Michael asked one evening, his voice calm but sharp, as though he already knew the answer. "I told you. I had dinner with Clara from work," I replied, forcing a casual tone. "You got home after midnight," he said, folding his arms. "Since when does dinner with Clara take 6 hours?" I froze. "We lost track of time. It's not a big deal." "It is to me," he snapped, his calm veneer cracking. "You've been different lately, secretive, distant. I don't know what's going on, but don't treat me like I'm stupid." I opened my mouth to respond but couldn't find the words. Instead, I just muttered, "You're overreacting," and walked out of the room. That night, I couldn't sleep. Michael's words replayed in my head, each one stinging more than the last. But even as I lay there, guilt twisting in my stomach, my phone buzzed. Still awake? It was Adam. My heart raced as I stared at the screen. I knew I should ignore it, but instead I found myself typing back. Yeah, can't sleep. Meet me. I know just the thing to clear your head. I hesitated, glancing at the sleeping figure of Michael beside me. But the pull of Adam's words was too strong. I slipped out of bed, grabbed my coat, and left the house without a second thought. When I met Adam that night, he was leaning against his motorcycle, a mischievous grin on his face. You look like you need some fun, he said, handing me a second helmet. Michael suspects something, I admitted as I climbed on behind him. Adam glanced back at me. Then stop overthinking. You're here now. That's all that matters. The night passed in a blur of speed, neon lights, and the rush of being far away from my normal life. We stopped at a secluded spot overlooking the city, the view sprawling and glittering below us. Why do you do this? I asked him, my voice cutting through the still night air. Do what? He replied, leaning casually against the bike. Chase danger. Pull people into your world. What's the point? He laughed, a low, easy sound. Because life's boring without risk. You think sitting at home playing by the rules makes you happy? You wouldn't be here if it did. I looked away, his words cutting deeper than I wanted to admit. Tell me I'm wrong, he challenged, stepping closer. You don't know me, I said defensively. He smirked. I know enough. Enough to see that you're dying inside, pretending you're okay with mediocrity. His words were like gasoline to the fire already burning inside me. He was wrong, but he wasn't. I hated that he could see through me so clearly. You act like you figured out life, I said, my tone sharp. But what happens when all this burns out? What do you have left? Adam's smirk faltered for a moment, and in that flicker of vulnerability, I saw something deeper, something broken. But just as quickly, he covered it up. You ask too many questions, he said, his voice lighter now. Let's just enjoy the moment. He was good at deflecting, at keeping the mystery alive, and it only made him more intoxicating. When I got home that night, the house was dark and quiet. I crept back into bed, hoping Michael wouldn't wake up. But as I lay there, staring at the ceiling, the thrill of the night began to fade. The next morning, Michael's silence was louder than any argument we'd ever had. He barely looked at me as he got ready for work, his usual goodbye kiss absent. Michael, I started, but he held up a hand. I don't want to fight right now, he said flatly. But we can't keep going like this. For a moment, I considered telling him everything, confessing the affair and the lies. But the thought of losing him, of destroying the life we built, kept my mouth shut. As soon as he left, my phone buzzed again. Breakfast? Adam's message read. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. I knew I was walking a dangerous line, but I couldn't stop myself from replying. Where? The secret life I'd built with Adam felt like a house of cards. Every time I returned home, I feared it would collapse, that Michael would finally demand the truth I wasn't ready to give. But the pull of Adam, of the danger and excitement he offered, kept me going back. One evening, Adam invited me to a cabin deep in the woods. It's quiet, no distractions, just us, he said over the phone, his voice low and magnetic. I don't know, I hesitated, glancing over my shoulder. Michael was in the other room, absorbed in paperwork. Don't you trust me? Adam asked, the challenge clear in his tone. That question always got to me. Fine, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. When I arrived at the cabin, Adam was waiting on the porch, leaning casually against the railing with his ever-present smirk. Took you long enough, he teased, opening the door for me. Inside, the cabin was cozy but minimalist. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, casting flickering shadows across the room. I sat on the couch, trying to ignore the nagging guilt that had started to creep in more frequently. Drink? Adam offered, holding up a bottle of red wine. I nodded, needing something to steady my nerves. As the evening went on, Adam was his usual charming self, easygoing, confident, and effortlessly captivating. But something felt off. He was more guarded than usual, his phone buzzing occasionally with messages he ignored. Who's texting you? I asked, trying to sound casual. He raised an eyebrow, his smirk returning. Jealous? Curious, I shot back, refusing to let him sidestep the question. Adam leaned forward, pouring me another glass of wine. Just people who don't matter. I wanted to believe him, but his evasiveness gnawed at me. While he stepped outside to take a call, I glanced at his phone, which he'd left on the counter. The screen lit up with a notification, a photo of a woman. My stomach twisted. I knew I shouldn't, but I picked up the phone and unlocked it. What I found sent a chill through me. Photos of women, dozens of them. Messages saved with details about their lives, intimate moments, and their secrets. "You've been busy," Adam's voice came from the doorway. I froze, his phone still in my hand. He stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "What is this?" I demanded, holding up the phone. Adam shrugged. "Memories." "Memories?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You've been doing this to other women? What the hell is wrong with you?" His calm demeanor cracked for a moment, replaced by something darker. "What did you expect, Sarah? That you were special? That this was some fairy tale?" "I trusted you," I snapped, my heart pounding. "You trusted me because you needed to," he said, his tone sharp. "You wanted an escape, and I gave you one. Don't act like the victim now." Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "You're a monster." Adam smirked, that infuriating confidence returning. "Maybe, but you're the one who walked into the lion's den." I grabbed my bag, ready to leave, but his next words stopped me cold. "If you try to walk away, I'll make sure Michael knows everything. Every text, every meeting. How do you think he'll react?" I turned to face him, fury and fear battling inside me. "You wouldn't. Try me," he said simply. I stormed out of the cabin, the cold night air biting at my skin. My mind raced as I drove home, Adam's words echoing in my head. He had enough evidence to destroy my life, and he wasn't afraid to use it. When I got home, Michael was waiting in the living room, his arms crossed and his expression grim. "Where were you?" he asked, his voice quiet but filled with tension. I went out for a drive," I lied, avoiding his gaze. "Don't," he said firmly. "Don't lie to me." The weight of everything came crashing down, and I couldn't hold it in any longer. "I made a mistake," I admitted, my voice trembling. Michael's eyes hardened. "What kind of mistake?" I've been seeing someone," I said, the words tasting bitter as they left my mouth. For a moment, he just stared at me, as if trying to process what I'd said. Then he got up and walked to the window, his back to me. "How long?" he asked finally. "A few months," I whispered. "Why?" His voice cracked, the hurt seeping through. "I don't know," I said honestly. I felt lost, and he made me feel alive again. Michael turned to face me, his expression a mix of anger and pain. "Alive? Do you have any idea what you've done? To us? To me?" "I'm sorry," I said, tears streaming down my face. "I never meant for it to go this far." He shook his head, his jaw clenched. "Sorry isn't enough." "Adam, he's dangerous," I said, desperate for him to understand. "He's threatening to ruin everything if I leave." Michael's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean? Dangerous?" I hesitated, but I knew I had no choice. "He has pictures, messages, everything. He said he'll tell you if I try to end it." Michael was silent for a long moment before finally speaking. "We're going to fix this, but you need to tell me everything, Sarah. No more lies." For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I hadn't lost everything yet. The days that followed were filled with tense silence between Michael and me. He was civil but distant, like a man holding back a flood of emotions. I couldn't blame him. I'd betrayed him, lied to him, and now dragged him into the chaos I'd created. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, Michael sat me down at the kitchen table. His expression was unreadable, his voice calm but firm. "Tell me everything," he said. "I already did," I said softly, avoiding his eyes. "No, you gave me pieces," he replied. "I want all of it. What he said, what he did, what you did. No more lies, Sarah. If we're going to get through this, I need to know the truth." I hesitated, but the weight of his words made me realize there was no hiding anymore. "It started online," I admitted. "He seemed different, exciting. I didn't think it would lead anywhere, but it did." Michael's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. "I kept seeing him," I continued. "I lied to you, to myself, and now he's threatening to expose everything if I leave." Michael leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed. "Why does he think you'd stay? What does he have on you?" "He has texts, photos, everything," I said, my voice trembling. "He's done this before, to other women. I saw proof. He collects us." Michael's eyes flashed with anger. "He collects you? Like trophies?" I nodded, tears welling up. "I didn't know. I didn't see it until it was too late." Michael stood abruptly, pacing the kitchen. "This guy thinks he can destroy us, manipulate you? He has no idea who he's dealing with. I looked up at him, confused. What are you talking about? We're not going to let him control you. Or us, Michael said, his voice resolute. You're going to meet him again, but this time we're going to turn the tables. The plan was simple but risky. Michael insisted on accompanying me to the meeting and staying out of sight while I confronted Adam. We'll record everything, he said, holding up his phone. We'll get him to incriminate himself. If he's done this to others, there's a pattern, and we'll use it against him. I was terrified, but Michael's determination gave me strength. The meeting was set for the next evening at a quiet cafe on the edge of town. Adam had insisted we meet alone, but I told Michael anyway. He parked his car a block away and waited with his phone smoth ready to record. When I walked into the cafe, Adam was already there, sitting at a table in the corner. He smiled as I approached, that same infuriatingly confident smirk on his face. Glad you came, he said, leaning back in his chair. I was starting to think you'd lost your nerve. I just want this to end, I said, sitting across from him. End? Adam raised an eyebrow. You don't get to decide when it ends, Sarah. That's my call. Why are you doing this? I asked, my voice trembling. What do you get out of it? Adam shrugged. Entertainment. Control? Everyone has secrets, Sarah, and I happen to enjoy finding them. You're sick, I said, anger flaring. Maybe, he said, leaning forward. But you liked it, didn't you? The danger, the thrill, you wouldn't have kept coming back if you didn't. I clenched my fists under the table. This isn't a game. Of course it is, Adam said smoothly. And you're just mad because you're losing. And the sound of a chair scraping against the floor startled us both. I turned to see Michael standing a few feet away, his phone in hand. Game's over, Michael said coldly. Adam's expression darkened. What the hell is this? Michael held up the phone. You've been recorded. Everything you just said, your threats, your admissions, it's all on tape. Adam's smirk faltered, but only for a moment. You think anyone's gonna care? It's her word against mine. And the other women? Michael shot back. How many of them do you think will stay quiet once they know you've been exposed? Adam stood abruptly, his chair clattering to the floor. You're making a mistake, he said, his voice low and threatening. No, Michael replied, stepping closer. The mistake was thinking you could get away with this. For a moment, it seemed like Adam might lash out, but then he grabbed his coat and stormed out of the cafe. The relief I felt was overwhelming, but it was short-lived. This isn't over, Michael said as we drove home. What do you mean? I asked. He's not going to stop, Michael said grimly. Guys like him don't just back down. We need to take this to the police. The thought of involving the authorities terrified me. But Michael was right. Adam was dangerous, and he wouldn't go away unless someone made him. The next morning, we filed a report, handing over the recordings and the evidence I had gathered. The police listened carefully, assuring us they'd investigate. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. Adam might not pay for everything he'd done, but at least he wouldn't have control over me anymore. Michael and I didn't talk much on the drive home. The weight of everything that had happened hung heavy between us. I don't know how we move forward, I said quietly. Michael glanced at me, his face softened by exhaustion. We take it one day at a time, he said. But it's going to take time, Sarah. You broke something in us, and I'm not sure it'll ever be the same. Tears filled my eyes. I'm so sorry. I don't know how to make it right. Start by being honest, Michael said. With me, with yourself. As we pulled into the driveway, I realized how much work lay ahead, not just in rebuilding our marriage, but in rebuilding myself. The thrill that Adam had offered came at a cost I wasn't ready to pay. For the first time in a long time, I knew where I needed to be, at home, with the man who had stayed, even when I gave him every reason to leave.